2. Welcome back, WNST and Baltimore Positive. We are in the third segment. Police Commissioner Harrison's already had 1 crab cake, 6 oysters, and now it's time for Don and I to get in here and get some crab cakes in the last segment. Nice. We are at Fadley's. We're down in Lexington Market. Don Moeller's here, and we've talked so much about consent decree. We've talked about all sorts of things in your background, but this crime reduction and departmental transformation plan, I'll hold it up for the camera here. This is the color version. I have the black and white back on my desk. Don was so shocked. He came over to the studio right before I went to Tokyo, and we laid down like 10. We had a Shop with a Cop, one of our segments with Mr. Ertel, and we put all these segments in, and Don looked over my desk, and he saw your crime reduction and departmental transformation plan on my desk, and he was really proud of me, weren't you?
You did a little research, did a little homework.
I came down to Cross Street. I've seen you give a few presentations. I was at Baltimore Homecoming where you came down in front of everyone at the train station. A few days later, I saw you you said you could do the 5-hour, the 2-hour, the 1 hour, the 30-minute. I got about 20 minutes here to really turn it over to you and let you speak to our people and to my wife, and any citizen that's invested in a brick here. This is what Baltimore Positive is all about. It's bringing people like you on saying, how can I as a citizen help you? How can the next mayor help you? How can Don over in Catonsville help you? How can someone connected to hundreds of thousands of people, not in the city but love the city, how can we help you?
I think the first thing we can do is all be on the same page about messaging. We have a major communications problem here where the negative is so overpowering and so overwhelming.
That's why we do the positive.
That even things that are wrong, people will tend to believe. We have to make sure we're on the same page about messaging and talk about the positive and highlight the positive of Baltimore, the great work that the men and women of the police department are doing. And I'll be more than happy to tell anybody about the things we need help with and we don't do so well. But we have to talk about the work that we're doing, and we have to create a communication strategy that's a collaborative effort that speaks to the work and what we actually need and how we get there, rather than always talking about how bad it is and what we can't do.
So when a young person comes, my son's my son's in his 30s, but let's say my son were 24, thought he wanted to serve, and comes to you. What would you tell a young person, male, female, about being on the force? The older version of you telling the now 24-year-old who's going to be a new recruit. What do you say to them about serving Baltimore?
Serving in Baltimore, serving in the profession period, is the most noble of all professions in my opinion. But serving in Baltimore is an opportunity to come to this department where there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of talent, and we are on the verge of becoming the greatest comeback story in America.
I love that.
So when you are looking for a department when you are looking for a department that's on the move, that's on the rise, the best technology is coming, and the country is watching to see how we turn ourselves around and become the model department. And so there are departments that are pretty good, but you don't know anything about them. If you're looking to be a member of a department that the world is watching, that the world will say, wow, they became a model department. You're looking to be a member of the Baltimore Police Department. Here is the place, and now is the time.
Let's dive in on that, because I had I think it's first of all, your enthusiasm, and I was only kidding for those of you listening, not watching. Damie Hahn, owner of Fadley's down here, cheered when the commissioner said we're about to be the greatest comeback story in America. So that enthusiasm is great. I once had a wise police chief say to me, Don, the challenge in recruiting is to be able to find officers who are joining out of a sense of service and not out of a sense of adventure. I assume you agree with that.
I agree with that.
Now, how do we do that? Break it down for folks. How do you, in the recruiting process, find out who wants to serve and who wants to be Wild Bill?
So when you look at our recruitment strategy and the digital marketing campaign, you don't see any helicopters, you don't see any tanks, you don't see anybody running with guns, you don't see any blood, you don't see any action. And we're really looking for the human being. And we're looking for the person who has the will and the capacity and temperament to serve. Because while the slogan sometimes read protect and serve, it was originally to serve and protect. It got distorted and turned around over time.
Interesting.
And we are looking for the right person and people from Baltimore and from the area around Baltimore who have the will and capacity to come be a part of a great team to help turn a department and a city around and be part of a solution. But it's about being community-minded and community-oriented, because this is a machoism profession. we tend to be paramilitary.
Well, you get a
which we
gun.
are.
You get a gun.
We're
I don't get a gun in my
paramilitary.
job.
Right.
It is the most powerful person on the planet because unlike Congress and the Senate and the military who have to get permission to act, we, based on our observations, have the authority to take life and liberty when it is justified. That is the most powerful person on the planet, and there's no more powerful position. But we have to have enough humility to ground us where we're grounded and rooted in service to where we're not doing that, but rather we're preventing people from putting us in that position. We really screen our people really carefully, but we're competing with all the departments, small and large, around the country for 2% of the applicants who are qualified. Of all the people who apply for this job and all the departments around the country, 2% are qualified applicants, and we're all competing for this.
Is your pay in Baltimore City for a beginning officer or cadet competitive with other counties in the region?
It is competitive with other counties in the region. Though we're due for a pay raise, we're competitive with other departments in the region. I think what we need is to look at a thing called pay compression, which is pay between the ranks and adjust the ranks, so that not only are we competitive at the entry level, but as you promote up to that first-line sergeant position, it's equivalent and competitive around the region at that level and likewise at the levels above it, so that when you rise up in other departments, the disparity of they make more at those higher ranks than we make at our higher ranks, that needs to be equal at every level going up. And so those are things we're going to work on in the future.
Commissioner, we talk so much to teachers about education. We talk to politicians. We have not talked a lot of policing here, and we talk so much about crime, right, with other people, and we talk about culture, especially in schools and what we're doing with young people, and you talked in the very beginning about changing the culture on the streets. How can your officers be a part of that? And it's so it goes to every Sarah Heminger we've met at Fred. It goes to every teacher. It goes to every politician and resources for schools. But to me, this needs to change with the youngest people we have on the streets in the hardest, most challenged areas of the city.
And Nestor, let me build on that. I love that question. I asked someone the other day, I said, we have police commissioner coming on. What would you like to ask him if you were on the podcast? He said, and it goes to Nestor's question. He said, you know what I'd like you to ask him? What percentage of reducing crime is really about crime fighting strategies, and what percentage is related to other things over which the commissioner has no control? And you alluded probably early in the first segment, that this got to be a team effort.
It's a team effort, and you said it a few minutes ago, it's a partnership. It is not the police doing it alone. And the question is, when are you going to fix the shooting problem is a question that should be asked of a collective group, not of the police department in a silo. So when you look at this focused deterrence model, it talks about a comprehensive violence reduction strategy, which is one of the better strategies in America, dealing with prevention, intervention. There's an enforcement pillar, but you got to deal with rehabilitation and reentry. Rehabilitation speaks to the addiction problem we have in this city. And prevention speaks to the education problem. Intervention speaks with interrupting violence and teaching people how to properly deal with their conflicts. So it is all of that, and it is schools, it's faith leaders, it's for-profits, non-for-profits, businesses, police, educators. It's all of us working together to change the culture in the community. But it does take prosecutors and judges. It takes everybody in the criminal justice system to have strong consequences, because we have to change the root cause reason of why a person committed the crime in the first place. To your question, what's the percentage of things that we can do?
Right.
Well, there are crimes of opportunity that deployment strategies and visibility and good policing can handle. And then there are what they call crimes of passion and crimes of premeditation, which are like murders and shootings. There are crimes of premeditation and crimes of passion that are done by people who know one another, which some deployment strategy can eradicate that, but not by itself.
I heard someone say the other day, a county officer, they had a domestic, and someone reacted, well, I guess that's good. And the police officer said, no, because the domestic's probably the thing we have the least control over. It's very hard to prevent a domestic in terms of police strategy. So we're talking, and I think the public, I'm trying to think, Nestor, of the folks in their cars again listening.
Well, let me put this
they believe all this. Let them see this.
Yeah, I want prevention.
I think they believe in prevention.
And you can find all of this stuff right now on the website.
Right in the plan.
Yeah, and learn about this. But this edge here, this is where I want to get in.
But wait a minute, before you do, because I want to get my question on that. I think everybody believes in the prevention, the education, intervention, but I can hear them screaming at their car right now saying, Don and Nestor, come on. That's all good, but ask the commissioner how we get the guns off the street now. How do we reduce the homicide? They're frustrated. They're angry. It's going to be the number one issue in the mayor's race. What does the commissioner do now to get guns off the street? I can hear them.
We are instructing our officers to be extremely proactive, but in a constitutional way. And let me tell you, we're getting guns off the street every day. 10 and 20 and 30 a week sometimes. And we're arresting people who are illegally carrying them. Many of them are not having consequences imposed upon them because the same group, the same demographic of people caught carrying guns is the same demographic of people
rehabilitation and re-entry.
Who get shot with guns.
Right. Well, and this is, I get off a plane from Tokyo, and I saw that there had been some sentencing for the young man who was murdered, the bartender in South Baltimore, where down a row house where I've eaten. And the first thing the comments come from the county is how long before these guys are back on the street, right? What do they get, 5 years, 10 years, 10 to 15? They'll be back on the street 5, 6, 8 years. What happens to those kids who were involved in a murder? What happens between now and then when you're 7 years into your commissionership, right, and they're now back out on the street again? Where is that rehabilitation and where is that opportunity? And that's not a city issue. That's not for the mayor. They go to a state penitentiary and get sent back into your precinct again and again. Every day there's someone leaving jail that's coming back out here where you've got to.
But we have to coordinate. We don't necessarily have to control the rehabilitation component, but we have to coordinate because there are many entities in the city, churches and non-for-profits that are doing great reentry work. They're just not coordinated, and they're not communicating with each other, much less the city. So it's about coordinating these efforts because I've been told through the science that you really have about 2 days, 48 hours after coming out of prison, that if you don't have an opportunity or something to walk into, you're almost on the path back to going back.
48 hours.
You have to be able to at least have something, somewhere to go and some connection with a promise of a pathway towards something positive.
How did that change in New Orleans for you?
Well, that changed over time, and we built a model called NOLA for Life that has this focused deterrence model, where we had preventive initiatives that dealt with young men between the age of 16 to 24, which is the core demographic of people committing violence and being killed by violence. We had programs for them. We had mentorship. We had heavy caseload management. We dealt with intervention with the drugs and coming off the ceasefire model, how do we intervene and have interrupters to go prevent retaliatory attacks? And how do we get young men to slow down and think, if I retaliate and do this, now I will then go to jail or be killed, and I'll put my family in jeopardy. And then, we dealt with reentry and rehabilitation, and it was a holistic program that went on the entire time that mayor was there. I was there for the second 4 years of his 2 terms, and that was a great program. And we changed the core demographic over time from 16 to 24 was the average age of a young man who was the shooter or the person who got killed. When I left, the demographic was the average age was 28. So we changed the whole demographic of who was shooting and who was being killed. Now, that mayor was there 8 years. I was there the second 4 years. But it takes a while to change a culture.
Was that Mitch Landrieu?
That is Mitch Landrieu. It changed the culture. And now Mayor Cantrell is seeing even more results because they're using the cure violence model, which is a health department kind of issue, and they're seeing even further results. And I don't know if they hit 100. When I left, it was 146. They're under 100 now.
Well, that's the kind of progress we'd obviously like to see.
We would like to see that, but it takes
time. I got it.
It takes programmatic solutions in addition to police deployment strategies. Those programmatic solutions come from the nonprofit world, and the church world, and the school and academics, and the police and the police department and the citizens.
Well, Commissioner, the citizen part, Nestor was stunned a couple of weeks ago when one of our guests, a mayoral candidate, talked about the clearance rates for homicide in Baltimore City.
That if my wife gets murdered, we might not catch the person.
Nestor had to ask it twice. He was so stunned. My recollection is it was around 14% or something. That 86% go unsolved. How do you? What? For example, it appears unusual when you look in surrounding counties. They typically have somewhere around 90% clearance rate. What is it that keeps us from clearing the homicides in Baltimore City?
Well,
how do we turn it around?
That's a great question, but that's a apples to potatoes comparison. The city of Baltimore with the surrounding counties.
Tell us why. Even though we probably know.
It is a different criminal justice system, and it's not that they have better investigators, because we have great investigators, but it's a real different comparison. You have to compare Baltimore City to another urban city that has a population and a similar culture. And because prosecutions and judges play a big part in those outcomes and the culture of violence in that community and the trust that the citizens might have with that agency and the willingness of witnesses to come forward in that agency. So
let's unpack that. You've talked about a lot of things there.
Yeah.
I can hear our folks in the car again. They're going, wait a minute, let me make sense of it. Let's start with, you said it's not an apples to apples comparison in the criminal justice system. When you mention that, are you talking about the relationship between the police and the state's attorney's office? Are you talking about something that's bigger than that? What are you referring to there?
It's bigger than that. It's bigger than the relationship. It is the quality of cases that go in. It's the willingness and ability to accept and prosecute those cases, and those cases being able to make it all the way through. But what does it take to get a case in? A lot of times it's evidence, and much of that evidence is eyewitness account. With eyewitness account, you have to have willing participants that are willing to come forward. That may be very different in our suburban and rural communities than it is in a very urban environment here in Baltimore, especially an environment where we've had things to cause mistrust that those counties have not had.
Well, and also the whole stop snitching and all of that that went on here for a long, long time, right?
Yeah,
well, how do we attack that then? So again, I'm back to the person in the car. They're saying, all right, I hear the commissioner. He's saying it has to do with criminal justice issues, has to do with, in some sense, witness intimidation or witness fear. How do we all agree, right, that 14% clearance rate is unacceptable?
Oh, it's totally unacceptable.
So how do we turn
It's higher
it
than
around?
14, but it's totally unacceptable. We're far beneath where we need to be for both homicides and for the non-fatal shooting clearances. It's even lower. But it goes up, and it goes up and down. So we're clearing some, but we need to clear far more. We need more staffing. We're understaffed. We need more training. We need more resources, but that's not the excuse. We need to do a better job. That job is not just for the police. It's a collective better job between the police, prosecutors, judges, and community, all of us. Many times the only evidence we have is eyewitness account. Now, it's apples to potatoes. It's fruit to vegetable comparison because in our suburban and rural communities, the dynamics that cause us to be in a position that we're in don't exist. There was no Freddie Gray. There was no uprising in those communities. There is no consent decree. There's a different level of feeling about policing from the community, perhaps. And you have to look at all of that, not just any one thing, but you have to really look at it all. Now, if you were to compare us to another big city that had an issue similar to us, you'd likely find that they struggle in the very same areas, like a Chicago or like some of the other cities. And I'm friends with all of those chiefs. But in comparison, it's really kind of unfair and kind of not wise to do a comparison of the big city of Baltimore with its regional counties.
Are clearance rates one of the data points that you will be looking at in a new records management system? Will you be analyzing clearance rates?
We're analyzing clearance rates, but we want to also analyze acceptance rates. How many of our cases actually get accepted into the state's attorney for prosecution and make it through all the way through prosecution that don't get pled down because it's a weak case or gets dismissed by a judge because of some reason. And so,
how often do you and the state's attorney talk about these issues?
I would say we probably get together every week and talk about them.
Do you have a similar vision?
Yes, similar vision. As a matter of fact, in the plan, it actually calls for us to have an analyst assigned to the prosecutor's office to vet all of the casework being done for shootings, non-fatal shootings, murders, and robberies, so that person can vet that work to make sure we know how well our work is going into the system, and if it needs improvement, we can adjust. And we get to know what cases they're dismissing for whatever reason, and judges are dismissing for whatever reason, and report that out in a transparent way to the community. That's the only way we can know to improve on something. So when we say, why are these people back out on the street, we need to know if it's our fault so that we can course correct. So we've funded, and she has now hired, I believe, an analyst to do this work for us to report out to the community.
Commissioner, it would be malpractice on our part to let you get away without talking a little bit about the gun trace task force, what happened, its aftermath. I have to tell you that, again, in getting ready for the show, when I reread some of the charges against those 8 to 10 police officers involved in that task force, it's mind-boggling when you hear about police officers running cars at people to make them run so they can arrest them, going in and finding thousands of dollars in a safe and dividing it among themselves, and then locking the safe and reopening it to make it look like they're coming upon a bus. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, many kilos of heroin and cocaine. I guess the question is, you get here, you look at that. I think the public wants to know, how the heck does that happen?
You know, that's a question I asked. That's a question that Judge Bredar, overseeing the consent decree, asked. And that is why, if you recall, a few weeks ago, we hired a private consultant, Michael Brumwich, to come in, who has done this for other big cities, by the way, to come in and do an assessment, an after-action assessment, so we can learn the answers to that. And he and his investigative team are here in the city for an indefinite amount of time to do that work. And because if we don't understand how we arrived at the mistakes of the past, we're doomed to repeat them. So I needed to know the answers to that, not just so that I can know who the people are who are still around, who perhaps could be connected to it and are still around. It's not just that. It is, what was the culture, what were the policies, what was the administration doing or not doing that allowed the culture to fester and grow into what it became, so that I don't repeat those mistakes, and whoever comes after me as the commissioner won't repeat those mistakes. Yes, we'd like people who are connected to it, to be held accountable, but what we want to do is not repeat the mistakes of the past. So as we change culture, we have to change the culture by learning how the culture even became that way in the first place. That work is being done. We've hired this consultant. In the near future, that consultant is going to produce a report to the judge, and inevitably the community will be able to see his findings on what we've learned about why and how that happened.
What are the cops? I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse of city police. What does the cop on the beat think about the gun trace task force? Do they just shrug and say, that's the way it was, or do they say, this is unacceptable? How do they react?
I think every cop I've spoken to, every police officer I've spoken to, where that conversation came up, was utterly appalled at the members of the gun trace task force who gave the department a black eye, and who have made it difficult now for all of us, because we all have to now we all have to deal with the backlash, the community backlash of that outcome, the community distrust. All the good officers have to bear the brunt of the community distrust because of what a few people did and what a few supervisors allowed to happen, and or whether it was intentional or not. And so the good cops tell me that they are appalled by it because it has made it hard for all of us. And just like in New Orleans, it takes years to get over those black eyes. And it takes years, it takes years to build trust, and it takes 1 minute to give it away.
All right, man. He usually is the one that does, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? So I'll leave this open. What have you enjoyed about Baltimore, the 9 months? And you can say the people and all that, but
the crab cake, the oysters.
But I mean, you came here, you moved your life here to do really, really difficult work. I mean, I have such admiration for that decision, because it's easy in life to stay safe and stay where you are. I could have stayed safe from where I was. I mean, honestly, the reason this exists, I looked out my window 4 years ago and saw the city on fire, and the next day I came on and talked about hockey and baseball and football, and 4 years later, the city's not better because of it. So I decided to start talking about these things. For you moved your life here. What do you love about here so far?
You're right. I know you said you can talk about the people, but it's always the people. Everything we do is about the people. It is all for the people. If it weren't for the people, there'd be no reason for police. And so it's all about the people. It's about the personalities. I'm a people person. I'm a personality person. And my wife is also. And so we love it. Do I like a challenge? Perhaps I do.
Clearly.
Right. Other than that, you'd be kicking back somewhere with a margarita, Commissioner.
Do I like a challenge? Yes. Perhaps. But it is really about the feeling you get. It's not – the challenge is secondary. It's the feeling you get having looked back over what you and the team were able to accomplish. And that feeling that I felt looking at New Orleans at the end of my career there's no feeling like it. And while it seems like you're in pursuit of the challenge, now you're in pursuit of the feeling of when we turn this around.
How long is it going to take you for how long is it going to take for where people like Nestor who live downtown say, I feel it, it's turning around? When will they start to feel it?
It's already happening. People in downtown, people in East Baltimore, West Baltimore, North and South, people are saying they see a difference. Now, it's not yet where they want it, but they see a difference in where it was before I came to where it is now. And over time, people will feel better about it. And, it doesn't come on. You don't really see it. One day you see something different that you never saw. You see a police officer doing something that you say, I never would have seen a cop do this. And you see it. And then over and over, there are testimonials like that. And then, so it takes a while, but people are already seeing a different performance level from the police department. It has not yet translated into overall, to crime reduction in murders and shootings. It has translated continually for robberies and burglaries and thefts and arsons and rapes and all of that. It has translated into that.
Great.
Because those crimes are still coming down even right now. But let's not forget, homicides and shootings are premeditated and crimes of passion by and large between people who know one another.
Commissioner, you've been more than generous with your time. Have a wonderful holiday. Nestor, let's go out and thank our sponsors. Commissioner, we're all in.
Happy holidays to you all and to all of your listening audience.
Yeah,
we're all with you. We wish you nothing but the best.
I want to encourage everybody to pick this up. This is the Crime Reduction and Departmental Transformation Plan from Police Commissioner Michael S. Harrison. I have a copy literally on my desk. Shocking to Don Moeller.
Doesn't get more Baltimore positive than this. And it's our sponsors, Nestor, that make this happen.
Jamie, appreciate you. And we have the entire Fadley's and Lexington market. We'll be back at State Fair. We'll be back at Jennings, hopefully having a burger that was better than the one I had at LAX. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you, Police Commissioner Don Moeller. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and Baltimore positive moving into 2020 with a little bit of spunk.